All right, looks like everybody's logging in, so we're going to give that a minute or two for everyone to join us. Thank you everyone for joining us on this lovely Tuesday for our monthly Business Bytes. We're excited to have Becca Freimuth with us today from the NCESD. So we're going to give it a couple minutes for people to come in, and then we'll kickstart this off.
I know about half of you, but if you could drop in the chat your company, that'll help me guide this conversation a little bit better.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. It looks like we've got quite a few people in already. So thank you, Becca, for joining us today. If you're not familiar with Becca, she is with the NCESD. We're really excited to have her on as a guest speaker today. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Becca, and she's going to be teaching us a little bit about filming videos on your phone. So with that, Becca, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we will get started. I made this presentation several months ago and it was like a 45-minute presentation. So I've cut back quite a bit, and the slides that you can see down here in the right-hand corner, that includes my full slides. So there's going to be extra stuff at the end if you go and download these slides. But I'm Becca Freimuth. I was born and raised here in Wenatchee. I went to college at Western, studied journalism, and I moved back in 2015. Since I've been back, I've worked with a lot of nonprofits specifically in this area, really focusing on building their communications and marketing strategy and implementation. I learned video when I was in high school and have continued using it throughout my career. And there's a lot you can do with phones these days. So I put this little presentation together to provide tips that I've learned over the years. So today we will cover storytelling with video, gear and setup, filming best practices, editing tips, and okay, sorry, I didn't edit this. Editing tips and software and publishing and sharing. We're not going to go over that today, but those slides are in the downloads. So let's get started. So before you even start to get a camera out or start thinking about your video, I have three things that I always try to think about before I start really planning a video. The first one is, what story am I trying to tell? This is really important. What is that key message that you're hoping to portray? And then what's your call to action? So call to action is a very buzzwordy thing in marketing, but it's, what do you want the viewer, in this case, to do after they watch the video? So start thinking about, what do you want them to do? And then the other thing I think about is how and where I will be using this video and who is my audience. So, and we'll get into this further in the conversation, but if I plan on posting this just on social media, it might affect how I film it, how long I film it. If I plan on premiering it in person through an event, it might be longer. And then who is your audience? Again, kind of goes back into what story you're trying to tell and what's your call to action. So I always start with these three questions, and I don't necessarily write them out, but I definitely think about them in my head. To help with that dialogue, there's a lot of different types of videos, styles that you could film. And so I just listed a few of them here. There's way more, but a lot of the ones I like to use as the interview style and profiles. And so I like to interview people to really tell the story through their voice, and then film a lot of footage that show kind of the day in the life or footage that supports what they're saying. But testimonials, tutorials, social media, live streaming, those are all different types of video that you could be creating. And like I said earlier, depending on which one you choose, you're going to film it a little bit differently. So after I think about my purpose of creating this video, I do some pre-production. So these are the 3 key things I always do before I actually start filming anything. And this just really will help you with the process throughout the whole process. So the first one is writing a script and storyboarding. Storyboard is really what you see here on the left. It's like drawing exactly what you want that shot to look like. I don't do that. I'm not a drawer. I'm not an artist. So I don't do this. But I definitely think about like what I want those shots to look like. So if I know I want to get a video of a student reading a book, I'll start to think about how I might be able to film that through different shots. The script, again, depends on the type of video you're doing, but if it is like a narration style video, definitely having that script before you start filming is key because it'll tell you what you need to film. And then, like I said earlier, I do a lot of interview style videos. And so I always prep my interview questions before the interview. And I always send them to the person I'm interviewing beforehand too, because I want them to be prepared. I want them to be able to talk about it succinctly so I can get really good sound bites from them. So I'm not trying to fool anybody or catch anybody. Like I really want everyone to be prepared. So I always prep my interview questions and send them to the person. And then, like I was saying earlier, I think about my B-roll. So we'll get into B-roll later, but B-roll is the extra footage that goes like on top of them talking. And so, like I was saying earlier, I'm always thinking about in my script and in my interview, what are potential B-roll footage that I need and how am I going to get that? So if I'm setting up an interview with somebody, I can say, okay, I need to do about a 30-minute interview with you. And then let's set aside like 30 minutes to maybe get some footage that looks like X, Y, Z. And then I can work with them to figure out situations where I can come in and film some footage of them doing things. So that's kind of all pre-production. That's all what I do before I start filming. We're going to dive a little tiny bit into some gear and setup for mobile filming, and really focusing on these 3 areas, which will give you instant elevation to the quality of your videos from your phone. So on your phone, there's actually a lot of video settings now on newer phones. But I wanted to keep this really simple and just call out a couple different terms and numbers that you might see when you're looking at those settings. The first one is 720p versus 1080p versus like 4K. This one you're probably a little bit more familiar with. This is the resolution of the screen. So the higher the number, the higher quality picture it is. You'll also hear 720 be referred to as HD and 1080 being referred to as full HD. 4K is now like what you're seeing a lot of new TVs come out with. But pretty much anything that you're filming, because a lot of it's just going to be on the web, can be 1080p. I would just stick with 1080p. You'll be good to go. And then the 24 FPS is frames per second. So your typical ones are 24, 30, and then 60 and beyond. So 30 frames per second, this is literally how many photo frames are per second to make your video. 30 is your average. It's going to be your standard, what you will probably film most of your stuff on. 24 frames per second has been considered a more cinematic approach or feel to the video. And then 60 is what you used to use to make slow motion. So what you would do is you'd film your footage in 60 frames per second, and then you'd convert it to 30 frames per second. And if you're good at math, you could kind of understand how that works. I'm not, so I just know it works. But these days you can get even larger numbers, like 120 is on a lot of phones these days, which just means it's going to make it even slower. So just as you get past 60, the higher the number, the slower that footage is going to get once it gets converted back to that 30 frames per second. Slow motion is really good for B-roll. You'll see that a lot, actually. They film that overlapping footage is often slower than, obviously an interview. So those are some of the settings you'll see in your phone. These are tools and gear to really help with stabilization. And so that's the biggest thing with phones is, I think people just throw up a phone and start shooting around and like going crazy with it. And then you look at it and you're like, I'm motion sickness. And so stabilization is going to be your best friend. So these are just 3 different examples of gear. So this top one is called a gimbal, and these are for handheld. And as you can see, and it will just make it insanely smooth. So if you want to be a little bit more mobile and walking around, maybe you're following people, you're touring through a facility, definitely getting a gimbal will help you stabilize that footage. A gorilla pod is a form of a tripod, but these legs on the tripod, they like bend. So you can like shape it around a pole or something and get this kind of funky fun shot. And then just a regular tripod is always good to have. And so you could set this up with for interviews, for B-roll, pretty much anything. So if you're just gonna buy one today, again, depending on what you're filming, if you're just to buy one today, I would just get a standard tripod. You could always pull the legs in and use that still to kind of stabilize your more handheld shot. It's so weird not having you guys ask me questions in the middle of this, because this is a lot of information. Audio is another thing I would almost say even more important. Bad audio, like no one wants to watch a video that you can't understand what they're saying. So these are 3 examples of audio recorders to uplift your audio with your phone. So this first one plugs directly into, this is for an iPhone. It plugs in directly to like where you charge your phone, and it'll overpower your phone's microphone with this really nice microphone. And so it's still really small. And then a lav, this is called a lav mic. These are the ones like lapels are also what they're called, that you hook onto your shirt. So this is really important for interviews, especially if you're in a noisy spot. This will cut back a lot of that extra noise. And in this one, this little thing in the left-hand corner of this picture, that then plugs into your phone and is a receiver. And that's how it then can overpower and be wireless. And then external audio recorders, again, are just additional microphones that are better quality that you could stick somewhere and record some more audio. So I'll spend the last 5 minutes really diving into some filming best practices as far as lighting, composition, audio, and B-roll goes. These are really I think are tips that if you just start to implement them a little bit, your footage will look better. Oops, if I can do it right. Yeah, okay, that's right. So lighting, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but always think natural lighting. So if I'm in a room that has fluorescent lights, I turn the fluorescent lights off and try to get by a window. And then I use the window audio or the window lighting. And then filming outside, you would think that the sun is your best friend, but it's not. It's like your enemy. It's better to actually film midday or to film when it's overcast. That'll create a nice kind of soft lighting on your subject. And I'm gonna skip over this. My computer's lagging a little bit on me. Not quite sure what's going on. I'm gonna stop sharing really quick and turn off my video. And let me try again.
I'm going to pop in for a second to say that if you have any questions for Becca so far, feel free to go ahead and drop those in the chat and we'll get to those here pretty soon.
Thanks. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what is happening here, but I think this is helping a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to keep my camera off just to make sure we can get through this. So composition, aspect ratio. This is really important, mostly when you're thinking about where are you going to be uploading your video to. So it's so important to, and since I have my video turned off, look at this picture that I have here, how it's landscape. You want to film your video in landscape. You don't want to be filming it like in selfie mode, you know, where you're taking a picture of yourself, that's portrait. It won't look as professional. So always try to remember to flip your camera, your phone, so that it's horizontal. And aspect ratio, but like an example of maybe when you wouldn't want to do that is maybe you're making an Instagram story, and so someone's watching it on their phone and they're probably watching it in portrait mode. There is a really good case where you probably actually want to film it in portrait mode. So that's why, again, at the beginning of the process, think about where is this video going to end up. Another tip, obviously think about your background. When in doubt, simple is better. A tip, pull them off the wall a little bit. It'll create a little bit more depth in your image. And then have fun with it. Think about different shots, especially when you're filming B-roll. I like to think in wide, medium, and close-up. This is a really good way to create a visual story in addition to just what someone's saying. I personally hate zooming in and out within the shot. That's a very personal preference, but I list that there. And then have fun and explore movement. You know, that's the fun thing about video is it's moving. So have fun moving your camera around and getting all of the shot, but keeping it stable if you can. Some composition tips, rule of third. This is huge in photography, but it applies to video as well. And a lot of phones and cameras these days have a setting where you can put these this grid on your screen, so you can kind of help to, and it will help you as you're learning it. But you can just see here, you try to line up on the 4 points. That's where your eye will naturally be drawn to. But these are all 4 great examples of different ways to use the rule of thirds. Headroom is another good thing to think about when you're like doing interviews. So headroom is the space above or below or to the side of someone's head. Lead room is where they're looking. So let me go back a slide. So you can see she's getting interviewed right now, and she is looking, her lead room is looking off to, I wish you guys could see my mouse. Her lead room is looking off to the right side of the frame. So that's what this lead room is. And this picture down in the bottom right-hand corner, if they're moving, you want to put more space in front of them so that the viewer is seeing where the person's going. And then real quick, 2 more slides. B-roll, like I talked a little bit about earlier. This is the additional footage that you're going to use to visually tell your story. Here's tips that I've learned. Always get more footage than you think you're going to need. I'm editing a video right now and I don't have enough footage, and it's making the editing process very hard. And then keep your files short. So think about 1 clip per shot. Instead of just filming forever, then in the editing process, you now have to watch that whole video and pull out the clips that actually work. And then, like I said, B-roll is helpful in making sure your video isn't just a talking head. It also makes editing that interview easier because you can cut all the ums and the filler words out, and like no one will know because there's footage over it. And then my last minute tips on audio is check your audio levels if you can. So some tools that you'll use, you'll see the bar bouncing from like green, yellow to red. Red means that you're clipping and your audio will be distorted and there's no going back from it. So the best word of advice is to keep your audio bouncing between -6 and -12 decibels. And going above 0 is where you're clipping. And then when you can, if you're using a lapel or a lav mic, hide the wires underneath their clothing if you can. It instantly just makes it look more professional. And I'm going to call that good because I am already at 12:21, and I know it's like, hi Preston, by the way. I'll go ahead and answer your question. What tools do you use to edit, specifically for adding B-roll over interviews? Great question. So in the slides, I dive into a little bit more. If you download them here at the end, I dive into the editing process a slight bit more. I use Adobe Premiere, but that is a very high level advanced editing tool. I think a great way to start if you're a Mac user is iMovie. It's a little more limiting, but it's a great way to at least start practicing with layers. So you can have that interview layer and then put a B-roll layer on top. Windows used to have Movie Maker. I have no idea if they do still. There are some other free ones. I'm always happy to dive into that with people if they want to explore that more. Lyda asked a little bit more about rule of thirds. I'm happy to go into that because I know I sped through it. Okay. So yeah, so you want to line up your subject on these quadrants. And I'm wondering, I really wish I could, I guess I can annotate. Maybe not. Draw. Nope, okay. I'm not gonna try that. So you'll see on this picture in the top right or top left corner, the yellow lines. So they've lined, this is like a very standard interview composition. They're off to one side on lined up against one of those vertical lines, and they're looking off to the other direction. So if she was over on the left or on the right side, on the right line, her body would be turned the other way and she'd be looking actually towards where she's standing right now. Her eye is lined up with that top point, and you can see down in the dog photo, his eye is lined up in that top point as well. So those are kind of just like very like standards of how you would frame people. I love this photo in the top right because I think it shows all of that. Like you have the two people lined up on the vertical lines, and then she is taking up the lower 2/3 of the frame, and his arm is like directing your eyesight towards her, and he's looking towards her. So those are just examples of how you can use that grid to just make your composition appeal to the eye better, just human being and how they look at things. I hope that explained that more.
All right, any more questions for Becca? Actually, Becca, I have a quick question for you too. So if you are sharing these videos to say social medias, is there anything to be cognizant of if you're sharing between say Instagram or Facebook? Is there anything that you can think of that you'd have to change or alter or, do differently in your filming process to share across the different platforms?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing goes back to the aspect ratio, as far as just figuring out how that platform shows your video. Is it going to show it is it going to make it a square? Is it going to show it as a vertical versus a horizontal image? I think that's really important to think about before you upload something. The other thing I will touch in here, I think I touch on it in my slides that are included in the download, is that the algorithms on social media prefer videos that are uploaded to the specific platform. So say I uploaded a video to YouTube and just shared it on Facebook, that link on Facebook, compared to somebody who uploaded the actual file to Facebook. The file on Facebook, the algorithm will naturally share that more with the followers than if they were just sharing the YouTube link. So that's also really important to think about. It takes extra time, but if you actually want your video to get viewed, you have to do that extra step, and it makes quite a big difference. And I think the other thing would be time, right? How long is your video? Obviously, depending on the platform, someone's going to be more willing to sit and watch the video versus wanting just a quick story. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Very cool. Thank you, Becca, for sharing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. But before we let you guys go, I do first want to say thank you, Becca, for joining us today. We really appreciate you sharing all of this information. And Becca did share her link to the slideshow for today in the chat, but we will also be sure to share that back out with you guys in our follow-up email. So you can expect that coming your way too. So before I let you go, I do want to let you guys know about a few things that are coming up for us here at NCW Tech Alliance. We have our annual summer scholarship fundraiser coming up this August 4th. It's a Thursday, and it's a fun dual event. It has a golf tournament and dinner. So if you get a chance, please check that out on our website. There are sponsorship opportunities available as well as dinner tickets available. So all proceeds from that go towards STEM scholarships that'll be awarded out to students and educators across our region. So please check that out, which is a great segue to our Innovator Awards, where these STEM scholarships will be awarded at. That comes up in September 21st. So with that, I also want to mention that our nominations are now open for the Innovator Awards. We're accepting nominations in 5 different categories, and you can find those nomination forms on our website. So check those out. Everybody knows an innovator. I know these last couple of years have been super busy for everyone. So keep your friends, your families, your coworkers in mind for anything they might have been doing that's pretty cool and want to be recognized for. So check those out. We encourage you to do that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn. Thank you again, Becca, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone. Feel free to email me. My email's here if you have more questions or want to run something by. I like to nerd out on it, and so don't hesitate. But thanks for coming.